We've talked about work, we've talked about employment, we've talked about business, and where you work matters, what you do matters, forms the basis for our conversation this hour. We're talking with our guest who's already in the studio. Frida Mwangi is the Deputy General Secretary at the Kenya Union of Gig Workers. I want to say gig, maybe she's going to say it's GIG, but I say gig, and she'll explain that to us. We'll be looking at working from home, also something else that seems to have, picked up a lot of steam as we've gone along. But let me just say welcome to you, Frida, and good morning.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and I'm glad to be here.
Karibu sana. Let's welcome you with today's proverb. CT is in a different African country every week. He'll let you know what that proverb is, and then you can tell us how you would translate that.
Yes, we are in the country of Niger. I'm told the people of Niger are called Nigerians.
Yes.
Yeah, I had to punctuate it just to ensure that I get it right. It's a wonderful country. Western Africa is largest by landmass. However, 80% of that country is desert, the Sahara Desert. But there is a lovely river that traverses that country. Goes even into Nigeria. The Niger River. It's one of the many, many rivers we have on this continent that traverse and connect countries. You are talking about the Chad River that flows through Central African Republic, Chad and Cameroon. The one we know is the Nile River. Look at where it starts and where it gets up to Egypt. There's the Limpopo. There's the Zambezi. There's the Congo River. My goodness. We said in the course of the week that these rivers are the true Pan-Africanists because they connect all these countries together. Okay. The proverb. No matter how good you are to a goat, it will still eat your yam.
Okay. That's interesting. But I think in my words, I would interpret that to mean that it doesn't matter what you do. There's still someone who's going to find a fault for you.
Right.
People will talk either positively or negatively, so you just need to do your thing.
Wow.
Very powerful.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. I love you.
That is profound.
Indeed, it is.
Simple but profound.
Very true.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess that's forms the tempo for the conversation that we have this morning. Working from home. In very many jurisdictions around the world, working from home was a very foreign concept, that you worked at home if you were doing domestic duty, and it was a different kind of work from home. Enter a world phenomenon, and I call it phenomenon and not a disease, COVID, in 2019 towards the end in some parts of the world, and then into 2020, people fast took on the idea of, okay, can we do this thing that we do in an office, actually in our homes, if we have the right technology to do that? And the answer very apparently became yes. There are people who homeschooled their children even before that, but we saw this with such gusto after COVID came and shut down the world for 2 years. So it happened that you could work from your house, you could work from a cafe, you could, you didn't have to be in the office to get something done. And we are now getting to the point where we're saying that, you can still bring in matters of contracting and security for your work, even if you do it at home. Give us an overview of this, if you would, because we introduced a new concept and now we are wrapping essentially the requirements and legislations and standardization around it. How?
All right. So first, I'd like to tell you that in Kenya, people started working from home around 2010. I've been in the space for now 10 years. And working from home at that particular time was not the one maybe you're referring to where you are employed, but because COVID came, now you have to find ways of thinking about how you're going to continue working. Working from home that time was freelance, where we would go to these platforms. There's one that's very famous, and at that time there were two that merged and became one that's known as Upwork.
Yes.
And then there's Fiverr and all these other platforms. But then what we did at that particular time is that you would get to these platforms and then you would find a skill that you feel you're very good at and offer that skill. So it gave you the opportunity to be able to work with people from all over the world. And at that particular time, because that then was very new, there was issues of payment, because some of the payment methods, like PayPal, were not aware of the African region. And when they did, okay, maybe they were, but they didn't.
Are they aware now?
Yes, they are. So maybe they were, but I think we hadn't got to a point where fintech is right now. And so in terms of transferring money, there was an issue in terms of transferring money then. And so the space has grown. People have learned different skills, but at that particular time, most Kenyans were offering writing and transcription skills, and then it moved on. So what 2010 did, it actually kind of validated what we were already doing, because at that particular time there was a lot of stigma in terms of what are you doing in the house with your computer. You never leave the house, and because of the time zones, you get to work at night when people are sleeping, and then you sleep in the morning. So there was no social and interaction, and so there was a lot of questions as to what exactly people do online. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're saying that those situations essentially need to be protected.
Yes.
How?
Yeah, because one of the first thing I would like to say is that we need to first define what these jobs are before we can protect them. We need to classify them, because we have location-based platform work and we have cloud-based platform work. What I mean by this is that when you think about location-based platform work, is platform work that is enabled by like an app or by the technology, but then you work offline. An example would be the Uber drivers. Another example would be the riders. An example would be the fundis who are using the platforms. So you get to connect with them on the platform, but they actually come to do the work offline. We have this other section of the cloud-based workers, and those ones now are the freelancers who are working on those platforms like Upwork. We have the micro workers. So the freelancers get to talk to their clients directly. It's just that the platform is enabling them to do this. But the micro workers, they get to a platform like the one that was very famous in Kenya called Remote Task. And you find your tasks there, and you get to do whatever you find there is what you get to do. And then we have the BPO workers, or the business process outsourcing workers, where we have people who outsource work like a third party. They could be location-based or cloud-based, but there are many of those are actually in Kenya right now. So that is fast. And then, of course, you have the content creators. So when we are talking about protection, it's usually very important to identify and classify where these people are, because as much as we have common challenges, there are some that are very sector based. And so the protection that comes in when we talk about protection is that it's informal economy. And so, of course, there are no employment benefits, because at this particular point, what the digital platforms have done is that they've pulled out and said, we are not employers. We're just offering a platform to enable you to get work. So we are not going to take the responsibility of an employer. We are not going to pay you, give you employment benefits, your pension and all that. But then at the same time, there are the people who are directly connecting with the workers. And so understanding the challenges and coming together, amplifying that voice, would enable that protection to come in. And also the payment issue. So when you think about the platform work, the challenge is, if you're working from home, there's isolation. If you're working in a BPO and maybe the content that you're using, for example, the content moderators and the data labelers, the ones who are training AI, there's a lot of things that you are being forced to clean up that affects your mental wellness. If you're working for Uber, there's the long working hours. If you're in the BPO sector, they work for about 12 hours. And so I think bringing all that information together is exactly what we want to do as the Union of Gig Workers, so that when we are talking about this and talking about the protection and thinking about the regulation, because the regulation in Kenya really is about the employer-employee relationship, and it was done in 2007. There was no digital, there's no mention of digital. So we need to have evidence, we need to talk about it, advocate for it, so that when the regulation is being done, it's actually ensuring that no one is left behind. Because most of the time when you think about platform work or gig work, your mind goes to Uber. The cloud ones are kind of left behind. But now what we are doing is bringing everyone to the table so we can talk and say one thing in unity.
Is it formal or informal at this point?
The gig work. The gig work is still informal.
It's still informal. So in order to have a formalized way of doing things, then there's certain things that need to come into place. Recognition is first. And if we're looking at the Ministry of Labour, it falls squarely under that. So what would then be the trigger that would then tell the Ministry of Labour to then activate something and say, okay, this is something that we then need to actually look into and start to put regulations in place, standardize it, protect it? If it's informal at the moment, that means it's unrecognized. So what happens? What do you need to do to get to that point, or to get from here to there?
Yeah, so first of all, we shouldn't ignore the gig work as much as it's informal, because when you look around the research that's been done both globally and here, some talk about 2.6 million in gig work. I mean, that's like a whole voting block, if you look at it that way.
2.6 million people in the sector.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you think about it, that's a whole voting block, yeah? So there are people you shouldn't ignore. The second thing is that we are in the digital economy, and government every day is talking about how they want young people to get in the digital economy. They want to create jobs in the digital economy, but then they're bringing investors in terms of the business processing outsourcing organizations just to create jobs. Then you need to ensure that as much as you're bringing investors, you're also taking care of the workers that are fueling this economy. So there's need to actually recognize this. And that is why we said, as much as we are pushing for recognition, we also need to take the responsibility of creating awareness and letting, so for example, the Ministry of Labour or the Ministry of Digital Economy understand very well what it means to be a gig worker and where you fall in terms of categorization, so that when they're thinking about recognizing, thinking about bringing in employment benefits, like Europe right now, they have said gig workers are not independent contractors. They are supposed to be employees. And so there has to be a lot of coming together, a lot of research, a lot of evidence, so that you're able to say, look, you can't ignore these people.
You know, the changes are usually very difficult to accommodate because we get comfortable with the way we're used to doing things. COVID, as we keep saying, changed all that. So things which we previously hadn't considered, accepted. And this particular century, because of the fact that it's what we call the communication age, a lot has changed. So this discussion about people who work at home becomes very, very relevant. Has the stigma disappeared completely?
Not yet.
Why?
Yeah, again, because of that understanding of who exactly are gig workers. And there's a perception of, and we see every time, where people are saying online, ni Mungu tu. You know, when you asked what you do, if you get some kind of wealth, it's really, so most of the time, online work is related to scams or, bad things that are happening online. So there's that stigma. And then if you're a young person and you just got into online work and you're not leaving your house and you're able to pay for your bills, people will be curious to understand what it is. And then there's also the perception of parents. You just believe that if your child is a doctor or a lawyer or maybe a journalist, that's what work is. And yet sometimes, and the ones that have really thrived in this space are doing better or making better money. But just the fact that you cannot understand, what exactly they do, then the stigma
is it that you don't understand or you don't want to understand?
So I think that depends on a personal level, because because as a parent and parents, friends, and everyone else, work. What is work? What are jobs? What have we been taught to think about when you think about jobs? So when someone is in the house and they're telling you that all they're doing is labeling, let me take that as an example. So they have this area where they are helping the autocars to navigate the roads without drivers. So when you get into that room, all you see is a very dark thing, on the screen, and they're supposed to label and tell the car. So when you see this is what this is. It's your the person around you might wonder, what exactly are you doing?
Yes. But I want to put this really politely, but you're ignorant. You don't know. See, being ignorant isn't bad. It just means you don't know.
Yeah.
Because you can do away with it. And that's where the willingness comes in. That's why I asked you, do they or don't they want to learn?
To learn.
And it takes me back to what I said earlier on, the way people resist change. See, this idea of someone working on the computer, okay. I look back at how long it took me to work on a computer. I attended classes to learn, and everybody who was there was like a quarter of my age. And every time I looked at my screen, what was on my screen was very different from theirs. So I befriended the people next to me and asked, so how do I get what you have on your screen on mine? I tried that for something like 2 weeks, and I figured this thing isn't working for me. Why? I am the one who had a problem. Being with young people wasn't my problem.
Yep.
No. My problem was my brain, the cogs weren't moving as fast as I would want them to move. They eventually did.
Yeah.
And why it is different is because I was wondering, why must I go through all this? But the era of someone working for themselves had arrived. I just didn't know it. Okay? Now, imagine if someone works in an environment where all these technological changes that we talk about, as far as they're concerned, certain computers have arrived, and that's just about it. So they work on the computer at their place of work. Now, that change, so that they understand you could do more, means then you need to understand the more that exists.
Yes.
And which you can actually use that same tool with, and that you don't need to be in a space called an office. Do you think that one gets more productivity out of working in a setup that you've described, or in working in an environment like this one where we are, with around 10,000 people around you?
Yeah, I think there are two ways to look at that. But in terms of productivity, yes. Because for the ones who work online, you sometimes are paid by the hour, the literal hour that you're working. So if you tell a client that I'm going to be working for you for 4 hours a day or 8 hours a day, it's very clear. This is a world where deliverables and milestones are taken very seriously. The quality of work, and so you become very productive, because if you don't, then you get to lose a client. These platforms will let the client give feedback. So you don't want to get really bad feedback, because then it affects the next job that you're going to get, because it's out there, it's public. And so, yes, you become productive. In terms of the other thing is isolation. The more you work from home, the more you're not relating with other people. So that social aspect, you would say, if the social aspect, maybe an office is better. But working from home, and I am biased to say this because that's what I do, it kind of gives you an opportunity to have global clients, and so you get to understand different cultures, and it forces you to upskill and learn every other time, because it's a dynamic space that is changing very, very fast. So you need to be relevant. You need to make sure that your skills are relevant and they are in demand. So that would be like the plus of working from home.
Working from home.
Yeah.
Looking at the informal sector of working from home. Can remote jobs also be classified here as working from home, or are remote jobs formalized? Before we now start getting into the rights of workers who are working from home.
Yeah, so remote jobs are formalized if it's an employer-employee relationship. But if you're using a platform, then that's informal. And so when you think about the platforms that people are using, what they have mostly is not contracts. What they have are service agreements. And these service agreements are very long. So when you join a platform and you register, most of the time people just tick, the same way people tick terms and conditions. And so you get not to really understand, and it's usually on the client side. So it's about their policies, how they require you to behave on that platform. And so what has happened is that because of that, people tend to work, and then you wake up in the morning and you find that the platform has switched off and you cannot access it. So one of the biggest issues in this has been with people who are AI trainers or data labelers. because they are the ones who are not, working with a client directly. What they are seeing is just this platform. When you think about the ones that are in the BPOs, they do have contracts, but they usually also asked to sign NDAs. And what this happens sometimes is that you cannot tell or write on your CV the work that you were doing with this organization, meaning that you're not able to bid or look for more work because you're not able to explain what experience that you have and exactly what you were doing. And then it comes to the issue of the skills. If you're working in a BPO or you're working in this micro work platforms, then your work mostly is to label things or train things. What does that mean after 5 years? You don't have a transferable skill.
Right.
So so there needs to be discussions around upskilling, even for the workers themselves and the companies that are giving these workers jobs. Because if after 5 years I'm not able to go out there and say something, then there's no growth there. And this is why these discussions are really important. And that, again, brings up the reason why we do require a union. So previously, people have been on social media.
Yes.
That's where we have been coming together informally, discussing. But you see, that is discussions between the two of you. You have no way of bringing these things out or the challenges. But right now, with the union, we are able to now think about what we have done, especially if you go to our social media pages. There's a form. Because we want people to tell us exactly what their challenges are, what they would want to see in terms of changes in regulation. And the reason why this discussion is very important right now is because this thing about gig work and platform work is not just Kenyan. And so even the International Labour Organization is speaking about it.
Yes.
And this June, there's a conversation around what would be like the bare minimum for every platform worker or platforms in terms of workers' rights and protections. And it's because we've noted that if a company comes to Kenya and they set up here, and then people start complaining about the working conditions, they will easily say, we are giving you work.
What's the problem?
Then, or if you don't want us, we'll just go to another country. Because the other country is less regulated, So, but with the ILO, that convention, yes, and recommendation, which the Kenyan government has already answered questions, and they're actually on the side of the workers. It's a good thing. It's now taking the journey to ensure that this is being implemented, so that we don't have platform workers doing one different thing in another country and a different thing in another country. Think about the content creators. They don't get paid here, but they get paid in other countries, right? You get Kenyan in terms of payment. There's also that disparity. I would be doing the same work, the same skill set, but because I'm from Kenya, someone says, no, this is not the amount that I'm going to pay you. Yeah. So, and we also need to also be able to tell people to read contracts or have in KUGW have like resources. Telling you that if you go to this company, these are the clauses you need to look at. If you go to this company, these are the clauses you need to look at. But at the same time, I know unions sometimes feel old-fashioned, but they are the legal organizations that are able to actually have a discussion with government and employers, right? And even the ILO itself. And so it's important that we are able to bring that information because some of our young people are actually afraid of saying what is happening in their life because they do not want to be fired. They don't want to be there's already unemployment in this country. Yes. And so if you get an opportunity, you want to stick. You want to you don't want to look like you're complaining, but the working conditions are really harsh. And so we also need to come out and say, what did your contract say? And is it aligning to what is happening to you right now? Yeah. And if it's not, this is a channel you can bring your complaints, and then we will use that channel to go and negotiate with this organization. So that's very easy in Kenya here. Not easy, but it's applicable here in Kenya. But for the global platforms, we have to bring amplify our voices with the ILO, especially with the convention that's happening in June this year and next year, so that at least there's a consensus in terms of what rights and protections do platform workers require across the globe.
What are talk broadly about them? What are some of those rights actually that content platform workers should have, especially since we're saying that the platform upon which you're working is not formalized, it's not recognized, and now we're saying push for rights. What are some of those rights that we're saying that you should be able to push for beyond your normal human rights, which we already know everybody should then have access to?
All right. So first of all, I would start with the working hours. Right? Normally, people work for 8 hours.
Yes. So
if you're working for more than 8 hours, and then you're earning your salary is very low, then it's frustrating for anyone because there's no growth there. So I'll give you an example. So you find that someone is working for 12 hours. They're earning about 28,000 Kenya shillings because maybe the organization is based in Kenya. The pay slip, they have to deduct the SHA, the housing and all and pay.
Yeah.
But then they still go ahead and deduct more. And it's not explained as to what it is. It's not for government, but it's not explained where the money is going. So at the end of the day, you have 19,000 and you are working for 12 hours or more.
Yeah.
That's not right in any way. And this is why sometimes people are talking about these organizations coming into Kenya are actually sweatshops. Because that's what they're doing. They're benefiting. They have many clients. The other thing is payment. So you get that these clients are able to get about $12 per hour, but then they pay less than $1 to the Kenyans. And it's okay because we agree that there is overheads.
Per job?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's overheads and all those things that they can come up with because they are businesses, but then that also need to be checked. You need to pay people well, right? Then in terms of contracts, these contracts are not long-term contracts. There are people who even sign contracts for every 6 months or 3 months or 2 months. That's not a job, right? But it feels like a job.
Wait. Why isn't it a job?
Okay, because at the end, it's a job, but it's not a long-term job.
Okay.
Yes, it's not a long-term job. So there's a lot of uncertainty. You won't be able to plan yourself financially. And so those are the areas that we want to look at. And because some of these platforms are foreign, and from the countries they come from, they're not treating people the same way. We we need to also say that there's safety issues. There's this and this that is happening, and you've already showed that you're able to do this in a different country. Why are you not doing it here? Yeah.
Okay. Is there push for recognition in the country at the moment?
Yes.
Towards the Ministry of Labour, we're talking about CS Alfred Mutua and his office. Is there push towards having this conversation, at the very least having the conversation?
Yes, so there's push for having a conversation, and the conversation has been there. So in terms of bringing in people like the ILO, bringing KUGW, bringing in all these platform unions. So we have the Transport Workers Union that deals with the Uber drivers, we have the Digital Borders Union, we have the Communication Workers Union, and then of course there is KUGW. And all these unions some are with cloud-based workers, others are with location-based workers. So, so we've been having conversations, even bringing in the Ministry of Labour in this conversation, because recognition is going to help give us a category in terms of what benefits are we supposed to have as gig workers, and also at the same time, when you are getting taxed, which category are you in? Because that is also not very clear. Are you an independent contractor? Are you a consultant? Okay. What are you doing?
So if there's no recognition at the moment at that level, how is there recognition for tax? How do they know where you are? Yeah. If you're working at home off any kind of record, you're just working off a platform. Essentially, the question is, then how do they find you to tax you if it's not recognized?
So what the government of Kenya has done is that it has gone ahead to talk to some of these global platforms and ask for tax, and then that is then brought down to the workers that are in these platforms.
Okay.
Right. And so our question is, if we are not categorized, then
how can you tax us?
How can you tax us? So there's the issue of digital tax. There's the issue of maybe you should be given withholding tax. There's the issue of maybe you're an independent contractor. And so if you're going to the tax discussion, let's first recognize this.
Who is supposed to categorize you?
The Ministry of Labor.
Okay. And if they were to categorize you and you fall outside the existing recognitions, then laws would need to change in order to accommodate you.
Yes, they do. Because this is also a different type of work. So we can't think about it like the normal type of work that we know. So there needs to be also that innovation.
But given the proliferation of it, it's becoming normal.
Yes.
It was not normal before. Now it is. You see, you mentioned something about working for a month, 2 months, and that being unstable and you can't plan. What if that is the norm? What if you work 2 months, 1 month you're laid off, you work 2 months? Why I'm saying that is, if I look at the casual worker in this country, in the times when you could get casual work, that's exactly how they worked.
Yeah.
There was no guarantee that you'd get work for a whole week. You might work for 3 days in a week, 2 days. If there's a lot of work, you may work for a week. Somehow you have to live. So it then needs, you need to plan within the circumstances that represent your reality. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, for this to be an even better conversation, let me ask the question. If you're talking numbers, how many Kenyans would you say right now are in that particular field of endeavor?
So according to the latest research, and I'm using this as because it's the latest one from MasterCard, KEPSA, and Immobilis, they said it was over 2.6 million.
In Kenya?
Yeah.
Over?
Yes.
Okay. So what should it look like? I mean, going into the place where we're getting to the point where, because of internet connectivity and other emerging technologies and others that are present, the likelihood is that there will be more people who say, well, you know what, then I can actually sit in my house and I can get something done on my computer if I have access. So there will be probably in the next, few, in the foreseeable future, there will be more people than the 2.6 million getting onto these platforms. So then it just, I hear the calls for regularization. I hear for regulation. I hear the calls for protections already ringing in my ear. So no time like the present, it seems to me, to start to have that conversation, isn't it?
Yeah. And we've been having those conversations. I think even the fact that we have come together now as a union, we've been having those conversations. And those conversations have been there for about 10 years or so, or even before. What happened is that at first, this space was also very hidden because when people found out about working on this platform, it felt like it's a secret society of people who just found this space. But then again, because people were coming in, internet, penetration and all these things, and also the awareness that I could actually offer my skills somewhere else. I don't need to offer them right here in Kenya. Those conversations have been ongoing, and I think for me, I love that it's the 10th year in this space, and it is the 10th year where we are getting to a place where now we are actually now coming out to say, here we are a union, right? So one of the things is that when you think about this economy, most of the young people working don't understand unionization. And so with that understanding, we went ahead and asked for KUGW and also the ILO. And we also recently, I think last week, this week actually, Monday and Tuesday, we had the International Trade Union Confederation, the global one and the African one, where we had 2 days for capacity building. Because we were like, okay, we already know that we have these issues. But we need to make sure that these issues have evidence, right? Because right at this moment, we say we have over 2.6 million workers. Where is that data? We need to confirm who and what are they doing.
You raised something interesting. How then do we guess it is 2.6 million workers when you don't have the data?
So that's data from MasterCard and KEPSA.
Okay. And how do they, I have to ask, how do they get this data?
So for them, they say that they have included everyone who, even if you've done just 1 hour of gig work, is included there for the rest of your life.
Okay.
So they did the research, which has a methodology. They sample people, and then
Okay. I'm asking this question out of ignorance completely. Okay, my question is this. What qualifies as gig work?
Gig work is mostly short-term. Gig work is project-based. Gig work is task-based, right? So you could have more than one client because they are not employers. So you could have more than one client. And one of the things that feels very good about gig work is the perception that there's freedom, there's flexibility. I can choose my clients, I can choose, but it's not that true at the end of the day. For some it is, for some it is not, depending on the work that you're doing and the person that's offering you this work.
You can choose your hours.
Yes, you can choose your hours and all this. But when you think about the realities of it, for anyone who's working in a business processing, outsourcing organization, they are not choosing their hours. Their hours are set. So they will work for more than 12 hours, right? But then their contracts are also project-based. So that is what gig work is. Gig work is short-term, and it's not that it's just begun now. I think even the musicians in the 1940s used to say, call what they were doing as gig.
Yeah. I have a gig. I've got a gig. Yes. Yeah. All right, so what do we hope to see going into the future for this? I mean, it seems like all of these conversations, this is the genesis of the process, but what do we hope to see going forward from now?
A lot of I think a lot of stakeholders discussion, a lot of awareness, especially to the young people that are in the space, so that they understand that as much as you're working, there are things that are, your rights. You don't, because there's a lot of unemployment. Then there's no quality work. No one is thinking about quality work when you don't have a job. You just want a job. You just want to earn something and put food, right, on your table. But then we'll talk about the importance of coming together, the importance of upskilling, the importance of ensuring that as much as you might be in the gig work right now, there has to be a career path also in the gig work. Because what is happening right now, what I started with 10 years ago, the work that I was doing online, it has completely been, AI has taken over completely. So finding that someone is still training a young person on the same thing that was taken by AI, I think in 2017 or 2018. So there's also need for that, so that young people are aware. Like I told you, when we came into the space, we only knew about 3 or 4 things, but now there's a lot. So being able to explain that, so that this space is not just, we are not competing on cheap payment, we are also competing on skills, and the quality of skills.
Well, I mean, it's a world that we have to pay attention to, and I'm just glad that you're able to join us for that conversation this morning. Frida Mwangi is the Deputy General Secretary of the Kenya Union of Gig Workers. Thank you for doing that with us this morning.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.